Frustrated with Vault's high costs and complexity? Vault's licensing fees, heavy hardware needs, and tricky regional replication are enough to slow any team down, and worse, they eat into your budget and delay critical deployments. Clusters everywhere, constant maintenance, and a great deal of planning for replication across regions. Today, I'm going to show you how Akeyless not only simplifies secrets management with smart cloud-native architecture, but can also slash your costs by up to 70%. Let's dive in. Akeyless versus HashiCorp Vault, secrets management at scale, and why Akeyless costs less. Now let's see how Akeyless saves money with smart architecture. Our agenda is basically we're going to look at why secrets management matters in the first place, challenges with HashiCorp Vault, how Akeyless solves these challenges, then a deep dive into architectural differences, and finally a demo walkthrough. So why secrets management? Well, it helps keep your passwords, keys, and credentials safe. It's essential for companies to protect their data and their systems, and of course helps avoid breaches and costly downtime. So what are the challenges with HashiCorp Vault? First, high licensing fees and hardware costs, as the architecture requires that as you expand into different regions. Second, complex to set up and manage. You can ask me, I've deployed multiple HashiCorp Vault deployments for my customers, and it is not straightforward. It needs a lot of planning and consideration. Third, requires clusters in every geographic region, as I mentioned, and that is what adds to the complexity and to the costs. So you need to have a cluster where your application lives. In every region, your application lives. The reason for that is to minimize latency for your applications because you want the app to talk to the local Vault cluster. And then finally, not all secrets are replicated. So if you're using something like performance replication across regions, you have to understand that only static secrets get replicated. However, leases, meaning tokens and dynamic secrets, anything with a time to live does not get replicated. So you need to really plan very well, understand your application very well, and design accordingly. Now let's talk about Akeyless and introduce Akeyless. And firstly, it is a cloud-native, true SaaS secrets management solution. It is easy to deploy and has zero maintenance, and it is a pay-as-you-go pricing model. And if we look at the architecture comparison between Vault and Akeyless, it really matters to understand this architecture because based on that, you'll see that you will have a lot less complexity and you can save a lot of money. So first off, Vault requires a full cluster in every region where you have applications, whereas Akeyless uses a stateless gateway in every private network that you have, so at the edge. And those gateways can run as containers. They can be in Kubernetes, so they're stateless really and very lightweight, don't require much hardware. Whereas Vault has a lot of hardware costs in addition to the licensing fees per cluster that you have to pay HashiCorp. Whereas these gateways, as I mentioned, they are stateless. They connect to the SaaS backend via outbound communication. And because it's using outbound communication, it's much easier for your security team to approve this as you don't have to open any firewalls inbound. And finally, when we look at Vault, it's complex to manage across these regions at scale, whereas with Akeyless, it's much easier to set up and far less costly as these gateways report back to that central SaaS backend. Now, if we look at the Vault architecture really quick, you'll find that the recommendation from HashiCorp using a Vault Raft cluster is to have at least 5 nodes, and a node could be a VM or could be a bare metal server, but you need to have 5 of these to make up a cluster so that you can have 2 failures in HA mode. And then you need to set up those clusters across the different geographic regions. So you can see one in central, west, east. These are active clusters and they are doing something called performance replication. And basically they're all active at the same time, but not all secrets get replicated, as I mentioned before. So you got to be able to plan that as you're designing your applications to have your apps talk to the local Vault clusters in the local region that they're in. And then in addition to that, we have something called disaster recovery replication, where you'd have a standby cluster whether that cluster be in region or out of region. That it's, again, a design consideration as you're scaling your clusters across regions. So you can quickly see how you now have multiple servers for each one of those clusters. And as you scale, you're incurring a lot of hardware costs in addition to the licensing that you have to pay HashiCorp. Now, if we take a look at the Akeyless architecture, you'll see that Akeyless, of course, is a SaaS backend running in the cloud, but then you have gateways that you're going to run in your private networks across the different regions. And these gateways report back to the Akeyless SaaS backend via outbound communication. Now, when I saw this idea of running your secrets management as a SaaS offering, I was pretty concerned to entrust my secrets to a vendor that's running in the cloud. Because of course, Akeyless potentially could have access to my secrets. Until Akeyless mentioned that they have this technology that Akeyless developed called Distributed Fragments Cryptography, or DFC for short. And it is an enterprise-grade security with zero-knowledge encryption, and you have complete control over your secrets, and even Akeyless does not have access to them. What basically happens is this DFC technology allows you to perform cryptographic operations without ever combining the encryption key. And you can see there are fragments of this encryption key that are distributed across the three major clouds, Azure, GCP, AWS. And as a customer, you have also the ability to have one of those fragments of the key that you would store in your own environment. And Akeyless has no access to that fragment, which means that Akeyless as a service provider won't be able to decrypt any data that is encrypted by you, and you need to have it enabled in your gateways that you deploy at the edge of your private networks. Now, let's take a case study here by a company called Cimpress, and it is a global company with over 12,000 employees and $2 billion in revenue, and it has a central security team of 30 experts, and they switch from Vault to Akeyless for cost and usability reasons. Now, what are the benefits that Cimpress achieved by switching to Akeyless? First off is a cost reduction. So 70% cost reduction, lowering their licensing, hardware, and maintenance expenses. The second one is a 270% higher adoption because of the easy onboarding and integration. And finally, a reliable and scalable solution that consistently performs very well across global teams. And with that, let's jump into a demo. And for the demo, I want to walk you through a dashboard tour of Akeyless. The dashboard of Akeyless is very powerful. The UI is much more powerful than the Vault UI, although Vault over the last few years has really improved their UI, but Akeyless is still superior in my opinion. And then we'll talk about a quick example of a dynamic secret and show you how to use that for secrets management. And then finally, we're going to see the gateway in action. And this is really essential to the architecture that Akeyless has and that simple architecture that we just talked about. Let's get started with our dashboard tour. And this will be brief as I have a separate video that will get into a lot more detail that you can check in the description of this video. The first thing here is items, and from here you can create encryption keys, static secrets, rotated secrets, dynamic secrets, as I say, cert issuer, PKI cert issuer, tokenizer, certificate, universal secrets connector, and OIDC app, and so on. So you have a lot of things that you can do directly from the UI, which is very handy. And you can see here we have things separated by folders. You can change the view here into just all your secrets, and you can see the path for each one of those secrets as well. So you can flip back and forth between folder view and list view. The second item I want to reflect on here is the ability to create authentication methods, which is very similar to what Vault has, but you have a little bit more in terms of what you can do here. So you can see generic API key, which is close to app role in Vault. Universal identity, which is really neat when it comes to solving the secret zero problem for on-prem deployments. And then other authentication methods, depending on whether you're a human or an application needs to authenticate into Akeyless. So this is the authentication methods. And then access roles is the authorization mechanism. So you can tie an authentication method with set of rules. So those allow you to do certain things inside of a keyless access, secrets in certain paths, and do things with gateways and so on. So that's the authorization mechanism in Akeyless, these access roles. Targets allow you to configure access to third-party applications, infrastructure. You can see databases, cloud. And from there, it becomes a lot more easier to create dynamic secrets. So you can, once you've configured a target, you can tie it to a dynamic secret very easily. And that is really a quick overview. You can see a whole lot of usage reports, audit logs, analytics, so much that you can see here in the UI makes it much more powerful than Vault's UI currently. The second piece I want to talk about here, a dynamic secret that I have configured here, and you can see I have under this clouds folder a bunch of secrets, and it gives you the type of secret on the right-hand side, so whether rotated, dynamic. And if you notice a blue dot at the bottom here for GCP, rotated, for example, it shows zero knowledge encryption. I have one for Azure, which means that I have created this secret with the customer fragment that Akeyless can't see using DFC technology, right? So that is something I wanted to highlight. But here, for example, I have a dynamic secret, and you can click on it. You can see some of its attributes, but very quickly you can click Get Dynamic Secret. What this is going to do, it's going to talk to AWS and is going to create an access key ID and a secret access key that you can use to do anything you want really in AWS. You can tie this to Terraform, for example, or any programmatic way to access AWS. The neat thing is, because it's a dynamic secret, which is a just-in-time secret, you have a time to live associated with it. And you can see a timer here. You've got under an hour for the secret to live. After that, Akeyless goes back and connects into AWS and revokes this secret. And the last thing I want to show you is gateways, which is what we talked about, how Akeyless has a very smart architecture. You can see I have a few gateways here, and these gateways could be in different regions, different networks. You can see one here that I have that is active. This one is running in my Kubernetes lab. It's the one that enabled that dynamic secret that we just saw a few seconds ago. If you click on New, it shows you how to deploy this stateless gateway that I mentioned. Two ways to do that, via Docker or Helm. You can see the Docker command that you can run here. If you want to deploy a gateway inside of a Kubernetes cluster in your environment, you can do that as well. And when you're deploying the gateway, this is where you can specify that customer fragment. And that way, Akeyless, again, cannot see any of your secrets that you deployed through this gateway. So that is how Akeyless makes their architecture very simple and also very inexpensive, because now, again, it's a stateless process, whether a container or in Kubernetes running inside of your private network, and it's communicating outbound to the Akeyless SaaS backend. So it makes deployment very easy and, of course, cost effective. Today, we explored why secrets management is critical and how traditional systems like Vault struggle with complexity, cost, and scaling across regions. Akeyless offers a modern approach with a stateless, cloud-native architecture and distributed fragments cryptography, giving you complete control without the operational burden. By eliminating infrastructure headaches and strengthening security, Akeyless empowers you to scale faster, operate more efficiently, and protect your data with confidence. Give Akeyless a try. Thanks for watching.